true discipline is the absolute mastery of desire, a cold iron grip on the throat of impulse. Most men believe they are born with a mind, but they are wrong. They are born with a chaotic storm of impulses, a wild beast that reacts to every spark. To own a mind, one must first starve the beast. Before he became the legendary Musashi, he was Takezo, a man of violence and untamed rage. He fought with the ferocity of a wolf, but he was a slave to his own bloodlust. It was the Zen monk Takuan Sōhō who saw the potential in this wreckage. Takuan bypassed manuals and stances. He tied Takezo to a giant cedar tree and left him to rot in the elements. He tied Takezo to a giant cedar tree and left him there for days in the scorching sun and the freezing rain. He left him to starve. As Takezo screamed at the sky, Takuan whispered a truth that would change history. You are not fighting your enemies. You are fighting the noise inside your own heart. Until you silence that noise, you are not a warrior. You are merely a wounded animal flailing in the dark. In that hunger, in that absolute isolation, Takezo died, and Miyamoto Musashi was born. He learned that the ultimate sword is the mind, and the ultimate fast is the refusal to be moved by the world. This is the origin of the sovereign mind. It was forged in the fire of starvation and the silence of a monk's lesson. But today we have forgotten how to be tied to the tree. We have become addicted to the noise. Your attention is no longer yours. It is a commodity traded by invisible digital empires. You wake up and immediately hand the keys of your consciousness to an algorithm. By midday, you're exhausted from the friction of thousands of useless stimuli. Your enemy is your lack of focus. You're trying to build a sandcastle as the wave of the information age approaches. To reclaim your sovereignty, you must return to the tree. You must do what Musashi did at the end of his life in the Reigando Cave. You must stop fighting the world and start starving the noise. In 1643, Musashi climbed Mount Iwato. He didn't go there for a retreat or a holiday. He went there to undergo a total systemic fast of the spirit. At 70, his body was a library of pain. His joints were stiff, his breath was shallow, and death was a shadow at his shoulder. Yet he chose the hardest path. He sat on the stone floor of the Reigando Cave and stared into the absolute dark. The Reigando Cave is a sensory deprivation chamber designed to strip the human spirit bare. For 20 months, Musashi lived on the edge of survival. He ate only enough to keep his heart beating, simple rice and water. He spoke to no one. He had no news of the outside world. This was a deliberate act of biological warfare against his own nervous system. He understood that as long as the senses are fed, the spirit remains a servant. By starving his eyes of color, his ears of music, and his tongue of flavor, he was forcing his mind to generate its own internal light. In the silence, the brain begins to eat itself. Every regret Musashi ever had, every face he had cut down in his 60 duels, and every missed opportunity rose up to haunt him in the darkness. This is the internal noise. Most people run from this silence because they cannot bear the company of their own ghosts. They turn on the television. They scroll through their phones. They seek any distraction to avoid the mirror of the void. Musashi stayed. He watched his thoughts like a hawk watches a field. He didn't fight them. He let them starve. He realized that a thought is only as powerful as the attention you feed it. By refusing to feed the ghosts, he became the master of the cave. He realized that the void was not empty. It was full of power. Centuries later, the cedar tree of Takuan has been replaced by the cloud of the digital age. Imagine Sarah. She is a high performer, a brilliant strategist in a global firm. She has the best tools, the fastest internet, and a mind that was once capable of deep, creative brilliance. But now, she is a ghost. Her focus is fragmented into 1,000 micro-decisions every hour. She is physically in her home, but her spirit is being pulled in 10 different directions by the vibrations in her pocket. Sarah is suffering from a dopamine famine. Her brain has been hijacked by a reward system designed to keep her in a state of perpetual seeking. She checks her phone to escape the void. Her brain is terrified of the interval between thoughts. She is afraid of the 2 minutes of silence in the elevator. She is terrified of the 10 minutes of quiet before sleep. She fills every gap with noise, and in doing so, she is slowly erasing her own identity. She is no longer a creator. She is a consumer of shadows. She is the wounded animal that Takuan warned Musashi about, flailing in a digital forest. One morning, Sarah realized that her life had become a series of automatic responses. She was no longer choosing her actions. She was reacting to stimuli like a lab rat. She felt the heavy weight of the scattered soul. She decided that the only way out was through the silence. She decided to build a Reigando Cave in the middle of the noise. Musashi's final masterpiece, the Book of 5 Rings, contains the technical secret to this focus. He describes the grip of the void. He teaches that when you hold a sword, grip the sword with the lightness of a bird and the firmness of a mountain. Rigidity is slowness, looseness is weakness. If you grip it too tightly, your wrists are frozen and your movements are slow. If you grip it too loosely, the sword is weak and will be knocked from your hand. This is the perfect metaphor for the modern mind. Most people try to force focus through sheer willpower, gripping their tasks so tightly that they burn out. Others are too loose, letting every distraction pull them away. Musashi's way is the middle path. You hold your intent with the lightness of a bird and the firmness of a mountain. He writes in the scroll of the void, "By knowing that which exists, you can know that which does not exist." This is the architecture of the sovereign mind. You find focus by defining the borders of what you will not allow into your temple. You do not build focus, you reveal it by clearing the wreckage of the trivial. The void is the clarity that remains when the noise is starved to death. Will and cut is not for the masses. It is for the few who are brave enough to be bored, brave enough to be alone, and brave enough to be silent. If you are ready to reclaim your sovereignty, subscribe to this circle. This is our 3rd duel together. Mark your presence in the comments. What is the one junk thought or digital ghost going to cut today? Your commitment is the only currency that has value in the cave of Reigando. In the cave, Musashi's days were a symphony of the brush and the blade. He understood the Zen principle that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. When he painted a shrike on a dead branch, he painted with the same lethal intensity he used in a duel. Every stroke was a life or death struggle for precision. In traditional Japanese sumi-e painting, there is no erasing. There is no going back. One mistake, one wandering thought about his dinner or his past, and the work is ruined. The ink on the rice paper reveals the truth of the artist's mind. This was his mental fast. He was training his nervous system to dwell entirely in the action of the present. He was cultivating Zanshin, the remaining mind. Zanshin is the state of a predator that has just struck its prey. It is a state of relaxed awareness, prepared for whatever comes next. While the world outside the cave was obsessed with more power, more land, more prestige, Musashi was obsessed with less. He lived on minimal sustenance. He wore simple, coarse clothes that scratched his skin. He slept on the cold stone that chilled his bones. By starving the physical desires of the body, he fed the sovereign will. He realized that every luxury is a hidden chain. Every unnecessary comfort is a distraction that dulls the edge of the spirit. He was becoming lighter, faster, and more lethal in his clarity because he had nothing left to lose. He had become the void. Sarah begins her own fast, inspired by the tree of Takuan and the cave of Musashi. She uses a simple chair in the corner of her room as her altar of silence. Her instruction is a command. 10 minutes of absolute mental stillness. No phone in the room. No music. No productivity thoughts. No planning the day. Just the raw, uncomfortable, and terrifying reality of being alive in the present moment. The first week is a psychological war. Her brain is screaming. It conjures up fake emergencies to justify reaching for a screen. It tells her she is losing time, losing money, losing her edge. Her body itches. Her eyes want to move. This is the moment Sarah realizes the depth of the occupation. She is experiencing digital withdrawal. Her brain is so used to the constant hit of dopamine that the silence feels like a physical threat to her survival. But she remembers Musashi. She visualizes him in the Reigando Cave, staring at the stone wall for 20 months, facing his own ghosts without flinching. She realizes that her boredom is a signal that her brain is healing. She refuses to move. She sits through the internal fire. By the 20th day, the screaming subsides. A strange, cold clarity takes its place. She notices the texture of the air against her skin. She feels the rhythm of her own blood. She realizes that the world's demands were mostly illusions. By starving the noise for 10 minutes, she has regained the reins of her life. She is no longer a reactive machine. She is becoming a sovereign human being. Weeks before he died, Musashi wrote the Dokkodo, the Path of Aloneness. These 21 precepts are the final blueprint for a self-reliant spirit, stripped of all Zen flowery language and reduced to pure strategy. He commands us, do not depend on a partial feeling. This is the foundation of focus. Most of our distractions are partial feelings. A slight itch of curiosity, a minor urge to be entertained, a fleeting irritation, a like on a screen. We surrender our years to these fragments. The sovereign mind ignores the partial and remains fixed on the absolute. Musashi lived this truth until his final breath. He did not seek to be understood by the world. He sought to be at one with the way. He died in the cave, sitting upright, his spine as straight as a mountain ridge. One hand gripped his sword, the other held his brush. He died as he lived, in total command of his attention. He didn't leave a legacy of blood, but a legacy of will. He proved that even in the face of death, a man can remain the king of his own spirit. He showed us that the cave is the anvil where kings are crowned and spirits are forged. Sarah's transformation is a quiet, intimidating shift in her presence. She moves with a newfound authority. When she walks into a boardroom, the atmosphere changes. She is not the loudest person, but she is the most there. She hears the hidden meanings behind words. She sees the flaws in the strategies that others miss because they are too distracted by their own brilliance. She is no longer frantic. Her focus is a blade that cuts through the static of the information age. She follows Musashi's final advice. Step by step, walk the 1,000-mile road. She understands that focus is not a destination. It is a daily defense of her borders. Greatness is the accumulation of 1,000 mornings where the window was chosen over the screen. It is the result of 1,000 moments where she refused to react and chose to act. She is no longer a victim of the era. She is a warrior of the will. The world will never stop screaming. The algorithms will only get smarter, faster, and more invasive. The ghosts of more and faster will always haunt the edges of your vision. you have a choice. You can be the leaf that is blown by the wind of every notification, or you can be the stone that remains at the bottom of the stream, unmoved by the current. Musashi's legacy is the proof that a human being can achieve absolute sovereignty over their own mind, regardless of their age, their wounds, or the chaos of their era. You do not need a mountain. You do not need a monk. You only need the will to sit in the silence and starve the noise. Everything you need is already within you. Seek nothing outside of yourself. The road is long, the path is narrow, but the sovereign mind walks it without fear. Join the order. This is will and cut. Do nothing which is of no use. Seek nothing outside of yourself. Miyamoto Musashi.